Welcome back to the swamp. We are once again in the midst of monsters. One of the most frequent types of stories I get sent are Skinwalker and Wendigo stories. These subscribers sent in their allegedly true encounters with what they call Skinwalkers and Wendigos. If you have a story that you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit it at swampdwellers.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. Now, let's get into these allegedly true, creepy experiences with Skinwalkers and Wendigos. My name is AJ, and this happened to me when I was 15. I'm 17 now, and I was camping in my backyard. We have a giant forest in my backyard, and I was camping with my friends J and T. I will not reveal their names for privacy reasons, but I did get permission from my mom for us to be in the backyard and camp. We were about 50 yards into the forest when we got set up and began cooking dinner. Please be aware, I'm a good kid, and tried to always be a good kid if I could. I do not drink or smoke, so we just sat around exploring the woods all day. It was getting pretty late in the day, so we decided to head back to our camp. When we got back, we ran to our tents and we fell asleep. I'm going to say around midnight or somewhere around there, we heard this blood-curdling scream come from the woods, followed by this god-awful smell. T said he's going to go outside to puke, at which point he opened the tent door and went over to the bucket. Brian then points his finger while shivering, and we ask what's wrong. My mom's overprotective, so she told me to take the double-barreled shotgun and my 7-inch combat knife. Brian just kept shivering and saying words like, Is that a monster? Of course I'm scared now, so I grabbed my shotgun, and I had given my friend the combat knife. Along the tree line I notice a white figure. I can't make it out because my eyes are still adjusting to the dark, but then I noticed that it stood up. I shined a light on it, and at first, I thought it was a person. I informed this quote-unquote person, "You have 10 seconds before I fill you full of lead." To my shock, the thing repeated what I said exactly, but in some messed up form of language. Without hesitation, I pulled both the triggers for the gun. After a loud bang, it ran off screeching so loud it hurt our ears. I yell, "Run!" J and T agree, and I grab my phone, the shotgun, and my combat knife, and we get out of the forest as fast as we can. In what felt like seconds, my mom heard us screaming. She asked what was wrong, and I told her about the creature. My mom went wide-eyed and told me to give her the shotgun. My mother is of Navajo descent. She got shotgun slugs and sprinkled ashes on the front of the fireplace. She then flipped over the kitchen table and pointed the gun at the door. It was then we heard knocking at the door, and my girlfriend's voice came from the other side. The problem with this was my girlfriend went to Florida to see her dad. So, we knew that wasn't my girlfriend outside. My mom started to yell in Navajo at it, telling it that it was not welcomed here. All night, my mom had the gun pointed at the door. By sunup, it was gone, and I haven't seen this creature since. I won't ever go back into those woods again. My mom has bought me a handgun, and it stays next to my bed. We also got rid of our old wooden door and put a giant metal door. I can still hear the screeching of the creature whenever I'm walking outside sometimes. My name is Sam. I grew up in northeast Georgia, next to Lake Hartwell. This happened around the late fall of my senior year in high school. There was a big patch of woods behind my house, and back in the corner of the woods led to a big open field. I put up a deer stand in the corner of the woods, so I could be hidden by the trees and still see into the field. The first time I saw it, I got home from school and went straight to the stand. It was about a couple of hours later that I looked across the field, and about 175 yards away, a deer was walking through the field. I took a look down the scope of my rifle to get a closer look. This deer was not right. It was sickly looking, and its limbs were too long for its body. It looked like it was sniffing around when all of a sudden it jerked its head up toward my stand and it seemed to look straight at me. It then let out a blood-curdling scream. I bolted down my stand and back to my house. I was very, very freaked out, but I was never one to believe in the supernatural and paranormal, so I shrugged it off and thought maybe it was just one screwed up deer. Fast forward to a couple of nights later. My dad had to go spend the night with my grandma because she was sick at the time, so it was just me at the house. Now in the living room of my old house, there was a sliding glass door that looked into the backyard. You could see the tree line of the woods from the door, and some of it was illuminated by a lamppost we had in the backyard. I was chilling in the living room when I glanced outside through the door, and in the tree line, I could see the same deer from the day before. I was very amused, so I went outside to get a look. It noticed me, and it looked at me. I called out to it, "You okay, fella?" What it did next still haunts me to this day. In the driest, most monotone voice it spoke, "Help me, Sam." I about crapped myself from terror when I ran back inside and grabbed my rifle and locked myself in my bathroom. I'd never been so scared in my life. I could hear it let out another scream just like the first time. I was crying at this point, just wanting it to go away. After a few minutes, the screaming stopped. I didn't come out of the bathroom till the next morning. I never went back into the woods behind my house, and I abandoned the deer stand. I couldn't chance ever seeing this thing again. I've only told a few people about this, but they all seemed to think it was either really tired or tripping balls at the time. I know what I saw, and I know it wasn't a hallucination. I still go hunting and fishing outdoors a lot, but I never run into anything like that. For the longest time, I didn't know what it could have been. But after hearing stories on your channel, I think I might have found what it was. I think it's a skinwalker or a wendigo. I find this weird because I didn't think those things would be in northeast Georgia of all places. I'm a 14-year-old male from Grand Junction, Colorado. I'm 6'1" and a previous smoker. I was an irresponsible teen back then, but I have changed. Anyway, me, my cousin, and brother went to a nearby small forest that we called the Glade so we could smoke because our parents didn't allow it. The forest is only about 2 miles from the outskirts of my town, and barely any cars are on the road here at night, so we weren't worried about getting caught. We started walking to the small forest about a half a mile long and a quarter mile wide, and we found the entrance to one of my favorite spots. If you walk about 5 minutes in, you'll see a giant pit that looks like a giant foot. By the time we got there, it was pretty much dark. I lit a fire and sat down and started to get high. I only took one hit when I heard a crash coming from the end of the forest. I panicked at first, but eventually I calmed down and smoked some more. There was a second crash, but this time it was closer. The crash continued again and again, getting closer with each time. We started panicking, stood up and started walking back to the dimly lit road and halted in our tracks. I saw this thing under the street lamp that was flickering. It moved in one fluid motion into the tree line. We walked on the other side of the street and this stench washed over us like compost on fire in a trash can. It was revolting, to say the least. We continued up the road until we hit a crossroad that turned left, heading into a bridge that was like 20 feet from the woods. I turned my head and saw a hand grasping a tree, its head poking out. I'm 6'1", but this thing towered over me by at least 5 feet. I felt as though its yellow eyes were looking into my soul. This monstrosity let out a blood-curdling scream, and I yelled to run. We took off so fast I sprained my ankle. I retched in pain and stopped and turned around and saw this thing fully in the street lamp. It was disgusting. It looked as if its flesh was melting off, and it started to steam, like taking the lid off a boiling pot. It stood up and looked at me, and right before my eyes, it had my brother's shoe and turned into him. It yelled to come here, and that he wasn't going to hurt me, but it sounded like a person from a different country speaking English. I thought of saying, "Begone, Skinwalker," but the only thing that came out was a low lion-like roar. It looked at me and tilted its head and dropped the shoe and fled back into the woods. I keep hearing it now at night. It's been 4 months since then. Let me just get this out of the way. I am not an avid believer in any paranormal stuff, but I love listening to scary stories and collecting weird antiques such as dolls and haunted paintings. I was one of those, if I ain't seen it, it ain't real, and I had never seen anything remotely paranormal until about a month back. My name's Charlie, and I'm 27 years old, tough looking, with a long beard and tattoos. In truth, I'm a softie, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, but I was born in Germany and moved here and to live with my boyfriend about 3 years ago. I worked at a company that repairs and resells old phones and computers. It's got decent pay and is close to home. Perfect for someone like me who has got no ambitions career-wise. I drive a 1960s Chevrolet Impala that we inherited from my boyfriend's dad. Even if I don't know anything about cars, there's a sense of pride riding around in one of those old machines. But that's enough of context. So, one day I got off really late, around 9 p.m. because I had someone quit and left a month's unfinished paperwork for me. I was compensated for my time, so I didn't mind. It was dark when I was finally on my way home, and I blared loud music because, in all honesty, I'm a bit scared of driving home in the dark. We own a lot of land and also inherited some from my boyfriend's dad, so our house is pretty far from any neighbors. To get home, we need to drive down a dirt road for about 10 minutes, then down our driveway, which takes about 3 to 5 minutes. So it's a lot of driving in the dark for someone who doesn't like it. As I was going down the dirt road, I see something run in front of my car, making me slam on the brakes. I got a good look at it before it scampered off, as it stopped in the middle of the road to stare at me. It was some sort of deer. It looked sick to all hell. Its skin was sunken, and you could see every bone in its body, especially where the fur was missing, which was almost everywhere. It had big, bulging eyes that looked super creepy when reflecting. Its teeth were exposed, like if you've ever seen a dead animal where their lips were kind of curled in or pulled back. The legs were the worst part. It looked like they'd been run over and then healed back in the wrong way, poking against the skin. I drive home and I call the wildlife service, worried it had some sort of disease that could spread to the other animals we kept on our property. They said they'd check it out tomorrow, and we let our dogs sleep with the animals to chase it away if it came too close. We didn't hear anything from them, and assumed it wasn't anything serious, so I kind of forgot about it until I was watching TV with my boyfriend about a week later. We were in the living room, which has 2 large, floor-to-ceiling windows facing the horses' grazing grounds. My boyfriend suddenly gets up from the couch and points outside. He told me to look, and that's when I spot it too. Just a few feet from the window, looking over the fence to the horses, is that deer. It looked much bigger than last time, and in much better condition, but the legs are what told it away from any normal animal. I got up and banged on the window, hoping to scare it away. It turned around and its face made us both jump. Its eyes were glossed over and looked like they were about to pop out of its sockets. Its teeth were still exposed, but they looked way too big for its mouth and were protruding from its jaws. We had a terrifying staring contest for what seemed like hours, but it was really just a few minutes. And then it ran off, but in a way that still gives me chills. It moved both its legs on the right side, and then its left side separately. It looks like some sort of toy. It made me nearly crap myself. It wasn't limping or walking, it was running. My boyfriend was scared out of his mind, and it only took many hours to calm him down, but at the time, he didn't tell me why he was so panicked. It wasn't until last week when we had our most recent and hopefully final encounter with this thing. We were driving back after visiting his mom in the old folks' home. It had gotten dark. We were going down the dirt road just chatting when the color from his face drains and he's fixated on something outside my window. I was driving, by the way. I look out and see that deer running alongside the car. We picked up speed and tried to lose it, but even when I sped up, it kept pace. We couldn't race off since it had been raining and the road was full of tracks. It could send us rolling into the woods if I tempted fate. We drove past our own driveway to not bring it home, and kept driving until eventually, it began lagging behind. I watched its yellow, reflecting eyes fall further and further back in the rearview mirror, just before the thing completely disappeared in the dark. I kid you not. The eyes rose up, like the animal got 3 times taller, or stood on its hind legs. It kept running after us like that for a few seconds before disappearing. We were both so scared we ran into the house and cowered in our bedroom with our dogs, being too afraid to even go to the bathroom alone. I wanted to call the police or something, but my boyfriend insisted we talk to his grandmother in the morning instead. Neither he or I managed to get more than a few hours of sleep that night, and we drove out to see his grandma the next morning. We had kind of managed to talk to ourselves into thinking that it was possibly a dream or something, but there were long scratches on the back of our beautiful car, which honestly pissed me off more than anything. At least we knew we didn't imagine it. Anyway, he told her about all the things that had been happening, and his grandmother said that she said my boyfriend's father had given him the land, given what lives on it. She's Native American, but you wouldn't guess she and my boyfriend were related because his mom was Canadian, and he got most of his features from her. She blessed us in our house and offered to stay for a few nights just in case it came back. I'm not used to this, and wasn't sure what to think of it all, but the sincerity in my boyfriend and his grandma's eyes make me want to believe them. He told me it's a skinwalker, or Eid Lushi, so I've been reading up on it, and I'm scared out of my mind. We haven't heard or seen anything since, so I hope it's gone now. We got some rules to follow, such as not leaving food out or speaking its name, and I intend to follow them to the best of my ability. I do not want to encounter that thing again. I'll update you if anything else happens. I'm not sharing this because I want to scare people on the internet. I just want to warn people to be careful because there's stuff out there that just isn't natural. My friend and I were sitting at his house on a nice hot summer day being bored. It wasn't long after we decided to go exploring a trail in his woods, so we got ready to go on this little adventure. We got his dog to go on us with this walk because my friend said weird stuff had been happening out in those woods. Didn't really believe him, so we started walking through his woods until we got to a trail. We started walking on it and kept trying to scare me as a joke. It wasn't really scaring me, more than annoying me. So we kept walking, enjoying the sun and the adventure. Soon, his dog started whining, and his dog is bigger, and didn't really get scared that easily. So, I was just walking, minding my business when my friend started running with his dog on a leash. He looked at me and said, "Run!" I didn't believe him, 'cause he was trying to joke around with me before. But he looked back at me with a really pale and terrified face and yelled, "Run!" once more. Then a sudden rotten smell got really bad. So I looked back, and there it was, towering over me and just observing me. This thing was not human. It had long fingers, pale skin, and was almost white as snow. It stood over everything by almost 2 or 3 feet. Mind you, I'm like 5'8". I was scared, so I took off without hesitation. The thing got on all fours and took off into the woods. As I and my friend were running, I looked over in the woods next to us, and there it was keeping up with us, running on all fours like some kind of animal. Then, I and my friend got to the little trail that led to his house, so he booked it back to his house. I've never felt so scared in my life. About a week later, I came back to his house, because we were bored. So I said, why don't we go back into those woods and see what was really there? So we did. It was just me and my friend this time. We left his dog behind. We walked through the little trail to get to the bigger trail. As soon as we got to the big trail, we heard a really distorted, high-pitched scream. Nothing like anything I've ever heard before. It spooked us to the point that we started running back to his house as fast as we could immediately. When we got back to his house, we started doing research on what it could have been. It turned out to be something along the lines of a Wendigo, in our opinions anyway. In the end, my friend and I agreed to never go out into those woods again. I'd like to remain anonymous if I can. I live in a small town in Texas where not much is happening or going on. To spice up life in the town and cure the boredom that hung over it much of the time, I decided to throw a huge ranch party about 25 minutes outside of town. The party went well and everyone there had a good time. It was such a rousing success, I gave thought to doing more of these events in the future. At about 2 in the morning, things wound down and everyone was going home. I cleaned up with the help of some friends, and then I got into my car and started to drive home. On the drive home, a black cat appeared out of the middle of nowhere on the road and glared at me. Surprised and unable to stop my car in time, I hit the cat. I felt really unsettled and bad about it, but continued my drive home knowing there was nothing I could do. Upon arriving home, I parked in the carport, shut my engine off, jumped out, locked the car, and ran toward the door to go inside. Before I could get inside, however, I heard a burst of disturbing laughter. The laughter was deep and it sounded distorted. That's when I went for the light, and to my horror, upon turning it on, I saw the same cat I had run over, staring at me from the hood of my car. Freaked out, I shut off the light and went inside, locking the door behind me. I was so freaked out I slept in my brother's room that night. Further research later on has led me to believe that I encountered a skinwalker, or some sort of shape-shifting creature, maybe a fleshgate, I don't know. I'm curious to know your thoughts though, and thank you Swamp Dweller for sharing my story. I live and have lived in northeastern Missouri my entire lifetime. I've always believed in the paranormal and cryptids and such, but I'd never had a real encounter with anything like this before. That is, until a few years ago. I'm 18 now, but I was about 14 or 15 when this happened to me. My mom had brought home a glow-in-the-dark Hasbro Ouija board and informed me to never play with it in the house. I, being the dumb teenager I was at the time, invited my friends over for a session one night when my mom was out of town. We played with that thing in our bedroom. As I said before, I never believed anything would come of it. During our session, none of the usual telltale signs or events occurred. The planchette didn't move on its own and there was no electrical issues or anything of note to speak of. As such, I thought nothing of it when we finished playing around. A few weeks after we'd used the thing, I began to have these horrific nightmares where I'd see a little girl in a white dress with black eyes moving closer and closer to me. Every time, she'd have these weird faces and she'd be whispering something I couldn't make out. She would get to me sometimes and I would wake up sweating and freaked out. Also, this happened as I always was unable to move, similar to like some sort of sleep paralysis event. This continued for 3 months, at which point the dreams changed. Initially, I thought it was over. I soon had dreams about Wendigos. Before having said dreams, I knew nothing of Wendigos. The dreams would always start out in a field. There were dead trees, plants, and nature around me, but no sounds whatsoever. Although I could and would run in any direction, it never felt like I was actually moving at all. Each time I'd have this dream, I'd eventually turn around to see a creature standing upright. The creature's legs were deer legs, its torso was human, and its head was the skull of a buck. It also had long claws like fingers on its hands. This creature would never say anything at first, but it eventually started screaming in an ear-bustingly loud manner. "The ones you love do not speak the truth." It would say this again and again. I would later find out it spoke the truth. Shortly after the dreams, my parents got a divorce, and I'd find out my dad was not truly sober, and my mom was lying about not having cheated on my dad. These dreams were mortifying for someone at my age. They went on for about 4 months before they abruptly stopped. I have not had these dreams since, and I have never touched a Ouija board again. Last year, from late August through all of September, I began researching things about the occult, the paranormal, and even lore and such like skinwalkers. I knew of a few other people who had done the same in the past, and their paranoia grew the more they researched such things. I have had a similar experience since researching these things. As for my story, things started off pretty standard. I got a feeling of being creeped out. Having done enough research on the paranormal and having experienced enough paranormal things myself, I brushed the feeling off as nothing. As time went on, the dog in the neighbor's yard started losing it roughly 2 to 3 hours at a time, for a period of 3 weeks or so. This seemed to be happening for no reason. This, combined with my uneasy previous feelings, was enough to make me stop going out to smoke at night. Eventually, this stopped for a short time. One late August night, I had a friend over, and felt comfortable enough to go out and have a smoke when the neighbor's dog suddenly started barking. It was going crazy, like it was going insane. Observing the dog's behavior, we thought it odd. Suddenly, my friend stopped and stared over at the tree next to the doghouse. Weirded out, I questioned my friend's behavior, at which point she informed me that she saw what looked like a person near the tree. Looking over, I saw nothing, but I couldn't shake the unease. The next 2 mornings, my friend got up for work and informed me she saw a dog we'd never seen before lurking around her car. She said every time it'd just stare and growl before leaving entirely. We weren't sure what was up, but we even discovered handprints on the glass outside of my window underneath the screen. I'm not sure if this thing is a skinwalker, a stray dog, or something else entirely, but it didn't feel exactly normal. This, coupled with the oddities happening around my house, have led me to believe that some more nefarious thing could be happening. I'm open to any theories anyone may have. For now, though, it remains a mystery. I used to hunt fairly often. The day everything changed started off relatively normal. In the end, however, I would never go hunting again. It was a hot summer day and I was wandering the woods, heading for my tree stand. I really enjoyed nature, and so when I reached my tree, I sat down feeling fairly relaxed and excited at the idea of another day out in nature. This would change rather quickly. I was sitting there for a solid 67 seconds when I hear a noise. It didn't sound like the normal deer or coyote I hunted. It was odd, and it startled me at first. Eventually, the noise went away though, so I forgot about it. I got a little stir-crazy, and after a bit I began walking. About 6 or 7 minutes into my walk, I heard the strange noise again. Baffled and a little curious, I looked through the scope of my rifle, and that's when I see something I have never seen before. The mere sight of the thing had me sprinting through the woods. It looked part human and part monster, but when it got closer, I saw it was a man with a knife. Freaked out of the presence of this guy, I ran. It wasn't more than a few seconds before he somehow caught up with me. At that moment, I was so startled by this I shot him. This quote-unquote man slowed down and began screaming in pain. I thought to myself, I stopped my pursuer. Good. The thought was short-lived, however. As soon as he starts running again, I'm at a loss, like what the hell? I'm positive I shot this guy and he shouldn't be running. It was clear he could outrun me, so I thought the next best thing I could do was try to hide. I ducked behind a rock, the only cover I could find close to me, and this man or thing slows down and starts walking right in my direction. I think I'm screwed, and am preparing to unload everything I have into the sky when he stops right in front of me. And by some saving grace of God, another shot goes off in the distance. The strange man runs in the direction of the shot, and seeing my only opportunity to escape, I book it to my house. The second I got home, I called the cops and they went to check the woods. It took them a solid 2 hours before they finally came back. They informed me they searched high and low for this quote-unquote man, but they couldn't find anyone. They didn't even find evidence of anyone out there besides myself. I thanked the officers for the time and decided that right then and there I was never hunting again. I looked into things such as Wendigos, Skinwalkers, flesh gates, and all those kind of things, and I kind of think it fits into there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments though. I need some advice. I don't want to give up my location, but I will say I'm in an area based close to Navajo land. The most identifying information I can give is I'm in Maricopa County. My issue is that I work at night, and about mid-April, I noticed something strange. I've never heard bird calls at night until this happened. I stopped my car to have a smoke, and was getting ready to hop out when I had the striking feeling to turn my radio down and roll down my window and listen. The well-lit parking lot I was in filled with what sounded like this weird noise. It sounded like 3 loud bird calls, is the best I can say. It was like several birds were talking loudly across the parking lot at each other. The sound was piercing and tittering, and the bird calls itself filtered through what sounded like several types of different calls, all in a single sequence. I got the sense these birds were practicing their types of calls or something, if that makes any sense. They were loud and did not stop, but chittered faster and more excitedly as I stepped out with my smoke and lighter. My chest tightened with panic, and the darkness that pressed against the edge of the parking lot filled me with deep terror. I climbed right back into my car and got the hell out of there. As I drove away, I caught sight of my car's clock and tried not to think about how unsettling it was that birds were so active at 1 a.m. I heard that ominous, cycling bird call follow me to work and home for the next week after that. It didn't take a single day off. One time in the early morning I heard it begin to imitate a younger sounding bird, and since then it's varied between that and the cycling chirps. The week after that, the calls have been present but less persistent. Tonight, I had a dream I was driving with a neighbor I'd never met before, when a human-sized animal on 2 legs came up to the car and stopped it, placing its fur molted mushroom-colored hands or hooves on my passenger side of the hood. I wanted to scream and warn my neighbor, "That's it, that's the Skinwalker!" But before I could say anything, and before I knew the creature would turn its head to look at me, and I would wake up. I had this dream today, and I knew I needed to ask for help. I've had several Navajo clients who I've thought of asking, but I didn't want to be rude or bring up bad luck, so I'm hoping to find some help here. My gut instinct is telling me to just punch this thing in the face if it shows up. but I figured I should find out the correct answer before I came to that. Since the first parking lot incident, I've strongly felt that this is a skinwalker, and I'm not sure why. Thanks for listening to these allegedly true, creepy Skinwalker and Wendigo stories. These were some pretty creepy ones if I do say so myself, and I definitely don't want to run into any of these monsters. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to send it in at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I would love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that really do keep this channel going. If you're new to the channel, why not hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a new video. I upload them almost every single day on all things natural and supernatural. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, it helps me out a ton. I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.